12 who were at high risk of progression to severe COVID-19. Now, the clinical study was done during Delta. However, nirmatrelvir does potently inhibit the protease associated with Omicron in an in vitro, meaning test tube, biochemical assay. So there's nothing to suggest that it won't work just as well with Omicron. Now, Pfizer's data has been reviewed by the FDA, but it's not been published. Now, their phase 2/3 EPIC-HR study was a randomized double-blind study of outpatients with COVID-19. The researchers gave Paxlovid or placebo within 5 days of symptom onset. They divided the groups into whether you were randomized within 3 days as well as whether you were randomized within 5 days. Now, in the group that were randomized within 3 days of symptom onset, what they found was 0.8% of people who received Paxlovid were hospitalized through day 28, which was 3 people out of 389 with no deaths. That compared to 7% in the placebo group. And in the placebo group, there were 27 out of 385 hospitalized and 7 deaths. Now, the statistical significance was very high with a p-value of less than 0.0001. Now, similar reductions were noticed in people who started treatment within 5 days of symptoms. Their study was stopped due to overwhelming effectiveness demonstrated. Now, side effects occurred in a similar number of people, 19% on Paxlovid versus 21 on placebo, most of which were described as mild. There were fewer serious adverse events in the Paxlovid group at 1.7% versus 6.6% in placebo group, and the discontinuation of the study drug due to adverse events were 2.1 in Paxlovid versus 4.1 in the placebo group. Now, the last medication I want to talk about is molnupiravir. This has been approved for emergency use authorization based on a recent study called Move Out. Unfortunately, in the full analysis of the molnupiravir study called Move Out, the outcomes were not as favorable as the initial interim analysis that Merck initially presented. Now, there's a link to the FDA document in the description below. Now, when you look at the interim analysis, there was actually a 50% risk reduction in hospitalization of death from 14.1% in placebo down to 7.3% in molnupiravir, which gives a number needed to treat of only 14 to prevent 1 hospitalization and death. Now, there were only 386 patients in the molnupiravir arm. Looking at the whole analysis at the very end, there were 710 patients that received molnupiravir and a similar number in the placebo arm. And the relative risk reduction overall in the study changed significantly. It went from 50% down to 30% reduction. And the rate of hospitalization and death were 9.7% in placebo compared to 6.8% in molnupiravir. So the absolute risk reduction is 3%, which is going from 9.7 to 6.8, meaning that the number you needed to treat is 34. So you need to treat 34 people with this drug to prevent 1 hospitalization or death, and that's a pretty big number. If you look only at the data between the interim analysis and the full analysis, which was during the Delta outbreak, there were actually fewer placebo patients who were hospitalized or died versus patients receiving molnupiravir, which was 4.7% in placebo versus 6.2%. So really there's poor efficacy in the latter half of this particular trial when we had increased circulation of Delta. This is obviously not good, and we don't know how this medication is going to work with Omicron. Members of the FDA advisory did point out that this drug may not work well with Delta, and again, we don't know how it's going to work with Omicron. Now, what previously got a lot of physicians, including me, excited about this medication was the number of people who died in the interim analysis, which was 8 in placebo and 0 in molnupiravir. But with the full analysis in the placebo group, they had 10 deaths, and it was 0 in the molnupiravir group. But the difference was primarily based on the people in the first part of the trial, which was before Delta. So not surprisingly, in the U.S., the FDA advisory panel, when they voted, was rather divided as to whether to actually even give emergency use authorization. and the vote was 13-10 to recommend it for EUA. So the safety data in total are from only less than 1,000 patients, about 700 in fact, and there's a concern with this medication that it could cause mutations with the virus, which could theoretically cause a new variant. So overall, it's very disappointing news. More research is clearly needed with this particular medication, but it is available in the US under an EUA. Now lastly, one of the things that can be helpful in any kind of nasal and sinus infection is that of rinsing the nose and sinuses. It's something that we recommend frequently in medicine to get rid of allergens or infections. Now from previous non-COVID-19 studies, the volume to mechanically flush out the infection does matter, and so a simple nasal spray may not be helpful. I want to clearly state that we do not truly know whether nasal sinus rinsing is definitely helpful in COVID-19, but I don't see a downside to rinsing the nose and the sinus with the packets that are provided by makers of nasal and sinus rinse products. If you use it that way, it's clearly safe. It may improve nasal secretions from infection, but it may or may not reduce viral load and time to symptom resolution. It may not prevent serious disease. There are some ongoing clinical trials that I wanted to mention, some of which include different additives that are being investigated to see if they might be beneficial. I would recommend against using any additives until there's clear benefit and good safety, but nasal sinus rinse products can be very helpful, even if it's just getting rid of a lot of the nasal secretions. I hope you've enjoyed exploring some of these outpatient or at-home treatments for COVID-19. There are things that you can do if you do develop COVID-19. Speak to your doctor if you're not sure.
The marks you see here are a recent result from one of my students getting full marks on one of their pieces and dropping only 1 or 2 marks on the other 2 pieces. So how do you turn your pieces into a distinction deserving? That's coming up next. Music Online UK. In order to get a distinction as an ABRSN exam with your pieces, it's not just good enough playing the right notes with the right rhythm. That might be good enough for a pass, but for a distinction, your performance needs to stand out. Now, the dictionary definition of the word distinction is excellence that sets someone or something apart. There needs to be a sense of involvement when you play, communicating the mood and the style of the piece. With this in mind, getting a good mark at ABRSN with your pieces starts right back when you choose your pieces. Now, I would recommend that you choose the pieces that you like the most. Those that inspire you, you will play more musically. You will play them better. When my students pick their pieces, I first of all play them all the options, and then I say to them, which one did you like the best? Now, sometimes the answer will come back, well, the first one sounded easier. To which I would point out that there are always difficulties. Sometimes those difficulties are hidden to the untrained ear. But that is not the way you should choose your pieces. You should choose a piece that inspires you the most. And with this in mind, sometimes I ask them to not look at the music, the sheet music, but to actually just listen to the music and choose based on what they hear. The next step is not to start learning the notes, but to listen to other good quality performances of the piece. Listen to how others interpret the music, how they shape the music, the dynamics, the articulation they use. Remember, you are a musician, not a technician. Now, YouTube is a very popular resource for students like yourself to listen to other performances of the piece that you're playing. But there are many low-quality performances on YouTube, and you should be especially careful of these. What compounds the problem even further is that there are particular channels that have been on YouTube longer, so therefore they have more subscribers and more views. There is one particular channel that has probably the most subscribers, and if you copy the performances of that particular channel, you will not get a distinction. If you do use YouTube, try and find quality performances, ones that are musically engaging. Now, to get a distinction at ABRSN, A good place to start looking would be the official marking criteria. And the marking criteria for the pieces is divided into 5 categories. That is, pitch, time, tone, shape, and performance. And by the way, I go into detailed analysis of each of those 5 elements in my ebook, How to Get a Distinction at ABRSM. For example, if we look at those marking criteria, phrases crop up such as expressive musical shaping, vivid communication of the style and character, assured and confident performance. Now, I've got a little bit of homework for you at the end of this video, where I'm going to ask you to listen to 2 performances of the same piece, and then come back to this video and comment on what you think is the difference between a pass and distinction. But as I said, that's at the end of this video. In the meantime, you've chosen your pieces, and now you start learning your pieces. Now, one of the things that I must insist that you do is that you start learning your pieces slowly. You learn them with all the musical details right from day one. Don't think, oh, I'll add the dynamics later. Put in all the musical details from the very first time you practice, and you'll need to play a piece slowly enough in order to do that. If you go too fast, you won't be able to take in all the information. The problem is that a lot of students will learn the notes and then go into autopilot as they start gradually memorizing the piece. And then when they come to put dynamics in or the articulation in later, they can't do it because they're not even looking at the music. It's in their heads. They're on autopilot. Muscle memory has learned to play it in a certain way. And then maybe if I ask them, oh, could you make bar 8 a forte, please? They will try, but because you're changing something in the muscle memory, it completely disorientates their autopilot, and they can't even play the notes properly, which they've learned automatically. So always learn the musical details right from the very first practice, and always practice slowly. You can always speed up the tempo of the piece once you have mastered all these details. Now, once you have learned the piece both musically and technically, it is time for the exam. You should go into the exam with confidence. Remember that one of the marking criteria for a distinction is assured, confident performance. And when you go into the exam, you should have prepared well enough so that you can forget about all the notes and start enjoying the music. That's right, I said the word enjoy in the same sentence as the word exam. But if you can enjoy your performance, the examiner will enjoy listening to it. And now for that homework I was talking about. Can you remember the 5 elements of the ABRSM marking criteria for a distinction? If you can, write them down now. If not, go back a little bit in this video and check what they were, and then write them down. And remember that in my ebook, How to Get a Distinction at ABRSM, I go into detailed analysis of each of these 5 elements. Then I want you to click on the playlist marked Homework, and then after you've listened to the 2 performances of the same piece, come back to this video and leave a comment below as to what you think is the difference between a pass and a distinction. Thanks for watching, and good luck with the homework.
Наш самый нежный шоколад. Милка. Вкуснее, когда нежнее.
Every now and then he'll give you the ta-ta-ta-ta. Chubby. You remember that? The first movement? Very variation. It's gonna come out. It's the same melody. You recognize it? Six variations. The clarinet kind of like from far away. It's embarrassed. And the bassoon is like, well, maybe. And then the oboe. No. It's like, okay, maybe. Sure, we can be happy together. I hope you can still recognize the main melody. It's just the same thing, but it's the variation of it. And just in case you didn't forget, number 7. In minor key. Sad. What do? You change one key and that's it. You go from happy to unhappy. I don't know what this is. It's like a bridge, maybe? But again, finding its way. Oh, okay. We're getting there. Variations, okay? Does it have it in you to maybe do one more? What do you think? Faster. For that. He shows you the melody again, but with a little bit more oomph. And he could finish it here. That's it. Like the first movement, he adds a tail, a coda, just to kind of finish it off. Remember that melody from the opening? theme, and we were able to count 10 variations and a coda based on one simple melody. So the second movement, yes, it's supposed to be slow, and we did follow that rule. Third movement of symphonies, particularly in times of Haydn and Mozart, were supposed to be minuets. They were supposed to be in 3, and they should supposed to be danceable. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And most 95% of Mozart and Haydn symphonies have minuets after the third movement. Da-dum, dum, da-dum, dum, da-dum. Beethoven took it a little bit farther. He actually didn't like the minuetto as much. He liked the faster version of the minuet, which is known as the scherzo. So most often than not, in Beethoven symphonies, you're going to find that the third movement, instead of a minuetto, has a very, very fast scherzo, which is still in 3, but you count it in 1. So instead of being 1, 2, 3, is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So you go, it goes very, very quickly. And I think that's following some of his own roots, his Austrian and German roots. He liked the dances. He didn't care so much about the French minuet. He wanted the dances to be a little bit more aggressive. And in this movement particularly, it is a scherzo. So third movements usually are minuettos or scherzos, and they're supposed to be danceable either in 3 or in 1, but they all have the same structure, pum ching ching, pum ching ching, pum ching ching, pum. Which of course, if you've ever heard of Johann Strauss waltz, he was the king of the waltzer. So in the case of the Beethoven, the third movement is a scherzo, and it's usually followed by a trio, then followed by the scherzo again. And the trio is not because there's 3 people, that's just how it is called in the form. The trio is the middle section. After you introduce the dance, there's like a middle section, and then you go back, as we call da capo, you go back to the opening. So let's hear the third movement of the Beethoven Symphony, of the Beethoven Fifth, which now listen to this. Where have we heard that? Ta 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 ta, ta 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 ta. Where have we heard that? You know? Did you realize that it is in your subconscious? Ta 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 ta, ta 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 ta. It's just low down. It's just like kind of grab it. It's like, oh, I'll mess with your head a little bit. Ta 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 ta, ta 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 ta, ta ta. Can you play the opening again? You didn't expect that, did you? rock and roll, you have to put yourself in the 1800s to fully appreciate this. Heavy metal. Again, he's getting out of the trio. And we go back to the sketch solo. With a little variation. Basically, you repeat the same thing, exactly the same. The scherzo just goes back and you play it again, and that's it. Very simple. The only difference is sometimes we minuetto, trio, minuetto. Now it's scherzo, trio, scherzo, because it's faster. This movement does something very unusual, which is, even to this day, extremely unusual. From the third movement, Beethoven goes into the fourth movement without a break. He builds a bridge. That takes us from here to the fourth movement, which is fast. In the case of the symphony, it is in sonata form, which has, and like the fourth movement, like the first movement, the last movement usually doesn't have introduction, so it goes into the exposition, development, and the exposition. Let's see if that happens. In this case, in this recording in particular, which is unusual, I have to be honest with you, the conductor actually takes the trio again, which I don't know why, it's not in the score. I don't understand why this conductor takes the trio, but it's so glorious I don't blame him for it. So from the trio he's going to go into the scherzo again, which is basically the end of the movement. And then there's going to be some sort of a bridge, one of the most magical, that's going to take us into the last movement, which is fast. And it is in sonata form, so already going to start setting up exposition, development, and the re-exposition in the last movement. So let's enjoy this for a while. I guess this is trio times 2. So it's kind of like a fake curve. It's like a little bridge. He's setting himself up. Magical moment to think of this.
Долго порно. Долго порно.
Great. And from the development, following the rules. After the re-exposition, we will hold on. Here he goes again. Looping. This sounds kind of final. Piccolo. Yes, I'm getting ready to grab my bag and run to the exit.